I'm Harvie S., and we're here for another episode of Harvie S. on Tap. This is where I tell stories that you won't hear anywhere else, and they're coming on tap, right out of the tap. And I'm ably assisted with my good friend Joe Carter, and a gentleman that not only has been a long-term friend, but we've done a lot of music together. I've recorded on some albums with him, and we've done concerts together. And now, another way to be together.
Harvie, once again, welcome.
Thank
It's
you.
always a pleasure to have you here. And I have a few questions that could stimulate a conversation, perhaps.
Okay.
And so I know about different parts of your life. The one that's a little fuzzy for me is the what I call the early Harvie years. Can you tell us about, I know you went to Berklee. Can you tell us about that time period or maybe shortly after? I met you when you were already established in New York, but what's that period before that? If you can talk maybe a little bit about that.
Yes, it was quite a turbulent period. Well, there's so much to talk about, but I'll just start with I went to Berklee. I was not a good student in high school, and I wasn't interested in anything other than doing music. And at that time, there was not a lot of opportunity and not a lot of jazz schools like now. Fortunately, I was in the Boston area, and so I wanted to go. I could go to Berklee, and I didn't need to have good grades to go there. So, and it kept me out of the draft because that was during the Vietnam War. And I'm not against the military in any way whatsoever, but I was against that war and still against that war. So anyway, I entered Berklee as a piano player, and I realized that I don't love playing piano. I just not me. I don't like to push buttons. So that's another story, but I will talk about that another time. But I bought a bass in my first year. I was 18 at the time, and for $75, and I just started to play the bass. I had no teachers.
And this is an upright bass? Or
Upright
a bass
bass.
guitar? Okay.
It was an old K upright, plywood bass, cheap bass, but you could play it. So I started gigging and working. So anyway, I'm not going to go through all the stuff, but I stayed as a piano major. And I graduated with a degree in piano, with composition, with a piano minor, actually. But I kept playing bass. And in my last year of school, George Mraz was the bass player in what they call the recording band, which was the number one band. George left school. He graduated and went on to make history, as far as I'm concerned, one of my idols. They somehow selected me to take his place. I couldn't believe it. So I was in the recording band. Now, Herb Pomeroy was running the recording band. Also, Herb was directing an MIT band.
Wait a minute. At the school, MIT?
No. At MIT,
Okay.
They had a jazz band. They had a big band. Okay. All these, mathematical geniuses, they also played instruments,
Wow.
Yeah, they had a big band there, and they were pretty good.
Okay.
Now, Herb says, the reason I brought that up, it was getting near the end of the year, and Herb said to me, he said, well, Harvie says, the bass player in the MIT band is not going to make this trip, and we've been invited to play at the Montreux Jazz Festival.
Wow.
He said, would you like to come in and sub in the band? And I said, yeah, that's great, And so I made my plans for the whole thing to do this. So then about a week or two before we're going to leave, he calls me up and he says, you know, I'm really sorry, but the bass player has decided he can change his plans and he's going to play, so we don't need you now. I said, well, you know, I've already made my plans for the summer. I didn't, you know, I mean, I was expecting to be there. He said, oh, well, look, we have budget. You know, we'll take you. So come to Switzerland with us and just hang out. And, you know, I've never been to Europe and never done that. And to go to the Montreux Jazz Festival, even though I'm not playing, just to hang out. I said, okay, yeah, I'll go. So I went, and I kind of befriended one of the trumpet players who is a guy named Jerry. He's still around, Fred Jacobs, and a very good trumpet player. He went to MIT, but he became a professional musician. That's all he did his whole, you know, it's all he's been doing his whole life. But anyway, he and I started hanging out, and I don't know how we hooked this up, but we stayed in Montreux during the festival. We was really supposed to be gone. We stayed at Claude Nobbs' house. He's the
guy.
He's the guy. He had this big mansion. I don't know how we hooked this up. We stayed in his living room. I had a sleeping bag, you know, which I brought with me, and I had a little knapsack and a sleeping bag, and we just stayed in his living room and we hung out, and it was.
But he knew you were staying there, right?
Yeah, he knew we were staying. It was crazy. This is the old days, you know.
Yeah.
So we're there now. I realized I need a bass. I don't have a bass. So I went to there was a bass store in the town in Switzerland, in Montreux, and I walked into the store and looked around, and it was a bass. It was not expensive bass, you know, and I was playing it, and I said, yeah, can I, you know, buy? He gave me a price, and I played, and the owner looked at me, he goes, Maestro. I said, and, you know, I'm like, I'm not that good. I had only been playing the bass for 3.5 years. You know, I wasn't killing, but he thought I was really good, and he gave me a good price. So I bought this, it was kind of a plywood back and a wood top. Not a bad little bass. I like this bass, and unfortunately it got ruined later. But I bought the bass, and it came with a really kind of cheap cover. And here I am in Switzerland, and I, you know, I still to this day I can't remember. Didn't seem to have a ticket home.
And you're what, 18 years old at this point?
No, this time I'm 21.
Okay, all right, okay.
I'm old,
but still young.
Yeah. So Fred says, "Don't go home. Let's go to Paris. I have a friend in Paris, and we can stay there." So we went to Claudio Caribe. You remember Claudio?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know you know all those guys. So crazy Claudio Caribe, he had this just really horrible place to stay. You know, just this funky, dilapidated building. And so we stayed there, and we hung out in Paris, went to jam sessions and did that. And then Fred says, yeah, let's go to Austria. I have a friend there. I don't know how this guy hooked things up. So we ended up going to Austria. We're hanging out in Austria. Meanwhile, I'm carrying the bass around in a knapsack and getting on trains and going everywhere with the bass. Then we ended up, let's go to Denmark. So we went to Denmark. Now, when I got to Denmark, I mean, I didn't have much money. I didn't have much going on. So I get there, and I'm in this, I took some kind of bus with the bass, and I'm in the middle of this square. And I'm like, what am I doing here? I have no money. Nothing. I see a guy with a saxophone case. He's walking. I walked over to him. Hey, how you doing there? And eventually it turns out that he was, he wasn't a famous guy or anything. He was living in this abandoned building where all the junkies were living. And he said, yeah, you can stay there. So I stayed in this funky building. Now, it's amazing. I would leave my knapsack there. I had like a bag, and I had my passport and money and everything I took with me at all times. But I left my knapsack, and it was okay. And my sleeping bag, and at night I would sleep there. So what I would do at night, I would go to the train station, and I checked my bass into the train station with the baggage. And in the morning, I'd go to the train station, get my bass, and walk over to the student center, which I could go use. And they had a room there, and I practiced much as I could, as long as I could. And I practiced, and then I started to get some gigs. And the sax player introduced me to a singer, and we kind of had a little band. And we were like kind of doing a few little gigs. Wasn't hardly making any money, but I am making a little bit. And so I was doing these gigs. And then he took me to Aarhus, which is a town in Denmark, which was a little far from Copenhagen where I was. So, and he said I could stay, you know, he had a girlfriend there, so I stayed at their apartment. I won't go any further on that. So, we're at this apartment, and eventually I found another place to stay, and I just living hand to mouth, and when I wanted something, I would book. They had a library, and you had some English books. I would get some books to read, and I was just practice. I had a bass, so I was practicing. Then somebody comes up. They didn't have cell phones, and I didn't have a telephone. Somebody came to where they knew where I was staying. They said, "We have a gig next week. Can you do this gig in town at the Tausgege? There's a club in the town," which I had gone to a bunch of nights. It was a great little jazz club. So I would go to the Tausgege, but he said, we have a gig. Can you do the gig? I don't even think I asked who the gig was. So I just was thankful for anything. So I get to the gig. I walk in, I set up. Now, this is the band.
Tell me.
Oh, Dexter Gordon on tenor.
Somehow I knew you were going to say Dexter.
Johnny Griffin.
Oh, man.
Art Taylor.
Yeah.
And, I blanked on the piano player. Oh, God. I had the
Harvie on bass.
And I'm playing with, there was the piano player that played with on a lot of early Miles Davis records. Kenny Drew.
Oh.
My mind. Shit. Yeah. I'm on the bandstand with these guys. And I play the gig, and on the second set, Dexter says, "I want to do Around Midnight, but I want to do it with just Harvie and the drummer."
Oh, boy.
Now, nearly peed in my pants. I was so nervous. I mean, I wasn't an experienced player. I don't know why he did that. So I said, I'm going to do it. And I played really simple, and somehow I guess it was okay. And I did a few more gigs with those guys. And so that was pretty much an amazing thrill. Then I was thinking, well, wow, maybe I can do something.
Maybe this thing can work out,
Maybe
right?
This can work out. But that was my time.
That's amazing. You're fresh out of Berklee. You go to Europe. You're living, like you say, you hand to mouth, but you're surviving. You're going from place to place in Europe. You're doing gigs along the way. You're practicing along the way. You're getting better on your instrument. And then you get that opportunity to play with those giants.
Yeah. And while I was living there, too, they hooked me up a tour. I did a tour with Jimmy Heath. I did about 2 weeks touring with Jimmy Heath. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.